Yes, we can now begin the interactive session. I'm glad that even in the previous segment, interaction had begun because of Monadiba's enthusiasm. Very good. Yeah, you have a question to ask.
I want to know that at this age we are able to think deeper and accept and align. With your experience of interacting with the younger lot.
Yeah.
How do you feel you have been, I keep thinking that if same thing could have been transmitted to me at a very early age,
yes.
I would have been a different person, but then I keep thinking whether I would have accepted the way I am accepting it now.
Very good. I think what you have said is extremely thoughtful and very candid. Appreciate both. It is true. This is part of the pathos of life, that things come a bit too late. Unfortunately, that is the kind of way of life that we have created, both at the individual level and at the collective level. You know, when you're young, you bubble with energy, enthusiasm, etc. A lot of potential. And at that time, you really don't have the required guidance to invest your energies, your talents, your possibilities in the right manner. And perhaps this is not such an unwise or bad thing. I tell you why. Part of the human learning comes through trial and error. Now suppose a young person like Arundhati, who is sitting behind you, she's one of my dear students. If a young person is given specific guidelines and shown like a signpost, go this way and not that way, and all the time that person is being guided like this, then actually that person may not experience the truth and the worth of what you are providing in the due measure, because the human ability to appreciate something is born only through committing mistakes. How in the world would you know that this option is better than the other option? You can only know that the other option was better. You see the difference? Therefore, it is not bad really. It's not bad really that when you were young you did not have these insights. I also did not have these insights. And I have gained these insights mostly through the mistakes I have committed. But I have not only committed mistakes, I have thought on them and through them. So the real thing is not that you don't commit mistakes. The most important thing is that you turn the mistakes that you commit to good use. And make them the stepping stones or the pilgrim path towards a better human being. Now, you have certainly become a good human being, otherwise you would not have appreciated the worth of these things now. As you quite rightly say, if you had heard this 40 years ago, 30 years ago, you may have listened to me, but it may not have really struck a chord within you. Something has now happened within you. That may not have happened. Very likely. Could happen in some cases, but need not necessarily happen. So there is a larger wisdom in the rhythm of life. Instead of feeling unhappy about the opportunities missed, think of the opportunities ahead. And the question really is, now that we have reached some insights, how will we actually make use of it? At home, in the neighborhood, in our social circles, so on and so on. That's the very purpose of this course. Okay? So thank you for your question. Any other? Yes, one after the other.
Sir, thinking is a spontaneous thing. How can I connect and disconnect instantly You have told about connect and disconnect for objectivity and subjectivity. It's a spontaneous thing on daily basis. How is it?
Thank you. I think I need to disagree with your presupposition. Thinking is not spontaneous. Thinking is deliberate. What is spontaneous is impulse. See, people react impulsively. All instantaneous reactions are impulsive. Other reactions or thinking reactions are deliberative. They result from a process of conscious thinking, subjecting the given situation to a certain degree of analysis based on certain referral points that I refer to. So that cannot be spontaneous. Right? Now, it is possible though, that when you have reached the higher and perhaps the highest levels of your growth, when your being has become such a finely tuned instrument, it may become possible for you to respond to the given situation like a genius. But I am describing the common run of things. For most of us, in my experience, thinking happens only when that event is over. Fully over. When I witness that event, I am not thinking, I am only witnessing it. Or I am vicariously participating in it. You know the meaning of vicarious? That is proxy as a second party. I am participating it vicariously. Right? But after I have done it, my process of thinking will begin. That is where objectivity is possible. When you watch something, objectivity is not possible. For example, you watch a tennis match, you watch a cricket match, you watch a football match involving two teams that are not connected to India. You will certainly take the side of one. Invariably you will take the side of one. And that is not thinking. That's impulsive. If you really sit back and ask yourself, why did I favor England? Or why did I favor South Africa? Or in football, why did I favor Argentina and not Brazil? Or Germany, not Argentina? You will not really have an answer for it. I have undergone this experience several times. There's absolutely no logical explanation for the partiality that I experienced at the time of witnessing an ongoing match. Therefore, objectivity is not possible at that level. Objectivity comes into play when, after the event or experience, we begin to engage with it, as Wordsworth says, like emotions recollected in tranquility. Okay? There's a question here.
Good evening, sir. My name is Jimpy. Sir, I have 3 questions. My first question is that does every person has its own psyche? Second question, is time necessary or a minimum criteria on which we decide that a person has its own psyche or not? And third question is related to these 2 questions only. That's a poor farmer whose mind is all filled with fear of landlord or zamindars and who has a very busy schedule from morning till night. So can such a poor farmer has or have its own psyche?
Yeah. Well, the word is Psyche. It's a Greek word, so psyche. When Greek words are pronounced, the last E is also accented, or it's pronounced psyche. Now, is it necessary for every individual to have a psyche? Absolutely yes. Otherwise, you will become like a dead counter. You will lack consciousness, chit, consciousness. And, for example, a computer does not have a psyche, right? Now, animals may have rudimentary forms of psyches because they have the instinct of self-preservation. They're capable of attachment to a limited extent, right? They can recognize a situation as it is, though they cannot recognize a situation as it is not, right? So it's a kind of rudimentary. I mean, Swami Vivekananda, for example, saw the whole of creation in terms of ascending stages in the evolution of human consciousness. For example, he says that consciousness sleeps in the mineral world. It wakes up in the vegetable world in a very rudimentary fashion and attains further growth in the animal world, but reaches full consciousness only in the human world. Okay, it is this particular endowment that we call the psyche or the mind, right? So how can we imagine a human being without a psyche? Now, as far as the farmer is concerned, I don't know if you've read Godan. All right. Munshi Premchand's Godan. Now, there is not a farmer. The main character is a kind of, yes, farmer, but a vassal, a slave farmer. It's a zamindari system, so the zamindar exercises complete control over him. But you know, Munshi Premchand depicts the character, the being of Hori, the character H-O-R-I, Hori, in a very subtle manner. Well, he actually doesn't reach full consciousness, but through the process of a graded degree of suffering, Hori reaches a higher level of awareness. But it is not thinking in the academic sense, I concede. He is not educated. He is not stimulated in the world in which he lives, except by the intensity of his deprivation and experiences of his poverty and disability as a human being. So I would say that yes, that way of life also contains a lot of thinking. But it's not thinking as the academics would recognize it. But I think that is extremely precious, valuable, and artistically very ennobling thinking. That is actually where where humanity pulsates. And for me, both as a student of literature and as a person who has done some work in theology, and this is extremely valuable. So I would actually value that kind of consciousness a great deal more than the intellectual cobwebs spun by academic philosophers. Right? Pardon?
Some people say that in Godan, Hori has no time, so he has no psyche.
No, that's not correct at all. Now, what is important is, yes, human life is spread on the axes, the axis of time and space. Now, because of the particular social, economic conditions within which Hori is embedded, the preoccupation is mostly with space. The space he occupies, the space to which he is from which he is excluded, what he owns, what he does not own, and what happens to him. But you cannot separate, when anything dynamic happens, as life necessarily is, you cannot separate time consciousness from the experience of space. In fact, one converts into the other in ways that language cannot always explain, because language has not developed to cope with this kind of deep mysteries. All that we know is that life is lived on the axis of time and space. So there is no human being, even the most illiterate, who is exempted from the dimension of time. The moment you exclude time, everything comes to a standstill. So plot, for example, is impossible without time. Plot is spread over time. From the time we encounter him till he dies of sunstroke, there is a large expanse of time. Now, the extent to which he is conscious of it, you are right in saying, or the people you quote are right in saying, that the intensity of your deprivation can dim your time consciousness. But that doesn't mean that it eradicates it completely. So human psyche can never escape the pressures of time. You know, to use a line from an English poet, he says, I hear the rumbling of the chariot of time behind my back. At my back, I hear the rumbling of time. You understand? So it's impossible to eradicate time consciousness from any human being. Now the quality of that consciousness will vary, obviously, right? I mean, you and I are not philosophers of time. There's a whole philosophy of time. Mathematicians experience time in a certain fashion. Physicists experience time in a different fashion. That's not my experience of time. The artist, there's a famous painting on time by Hans Holbein the Younger, which depicts time as a chariot drawn by two horses. One is black and the other is white. And on the chariot, there is an hourglass in which particles of time, particles of sand are dripping down all the time, right? But in the background is a tree on which there is a clock. That is objective time, time consciousness, because this clock will strike. Okay? The particles of sand in the hourglass will fall down silently. And the man traveling in the chariot of time is not aware of this. But even if he is not aware of it, the hourglass will empty itself and overturn. Right? But there are times when now and then the clock will strike and he will become conscious of it. Right? So time consciousness can either be subjective and unconscious, or it can be objective and consciousness, but no life can be lived entirely on one. No life can be lived entirely on the subjective consciousness of time, nor on the objective consciousness of time. We always alternate between the two. Okay? So, and this alternation between the two modes of time can be influenced by social, economic, cultural factors. But they don't eliminate time consciousness. Right?
Yeah. So,
yes.
My point is that we all take decisions in day-to-day life. Suppose I take 10 decisions, it's not necessary that all the 10 decisions will be true. Maybe out of that 4 decisions will be wrong and 6 decisions. It doesn't make me any sense to stop taking decisions. And all these decisions are based on some thought process. That means thinking is involved into it.
Yes.
Shall I presume that basic logic for that thinking, for those 5 decisions which has gone wrong, have somewhere been given the thought process was different, it was basically wrong notions that has come into that process while thinking that particular task or something like that. Does that mean like that only?
Yes, it is absolutely true that not all decisions or choices we make are helpful or valid or productive of our own good or happiness. Quite true. Why does it happen? After all, when we decide for ourselves, simple common sense tells us that we will choose the best option. But it turns out to be not the best option. What is the reason for it? There are many reasons for it. One is, and that is a very strange thing, that in the process of examining our prospects or the options before us, we may not be adequately free. We may not be sufficiently objective because our mind, to the extent that it is not trained, plays games with us. Now, this is something very difficult to explain. Our own mind plays games with us. You see, one of the perennial problems in human experience is the degree of our self-control or lack of it. At no stage in our life we have complete control over ourselves. We have only relative degrees of self-control. It's a duty of every human being to improve the control over oneself. So it means that at any given point in time, our self-control is not completely developed, right? And therefore, at that point in time, when we examine options, it is not the case that the best self in us is actually handling the matter. Now, human nature is a mixed up affair. Good and evil, right and wrong, objectivity, subjectivity, selfishness and altruism, sense and foolishness, all these things coexist within our inner life. And it all depends on certain contextual considerations also. For example, suppose we are thinking for our children, then we use a certain set of references. Suppose we are thinking for somebody else's children, many of the ingredients in those term of references may be absent. Now, we have all those references with us, but at that particular point in time, in the experience of making choices, how many of the ingredients that are already present us are allowed to be operative? You understand? This is what I have already referred to as self-control. Control doesn't simply mean like, break. Control also is the enabling thing. Okay? You control certain things in order to empower certain things. Okay? You cannot push all the 10 items together. In order that 2 things may go forward, you may have to hold 8 items back. All these are, extremely personal things in one's own context, but it's again not completely personal because, as I said, there has to be and there is a shared framework of references. And this will also in part answer your question. So, the second thing I want to say is this. Never mind how many of the choices you make are right or wrong at that point in time. Yes, you will suffer consequences. But do not think that bad consequences are only bad. Bad consequences are sometimes the best consequences. That's part of the mystery of life. Actually, when I look back, I'm also happy for some of the mistakes I have committed, because I have learned a great deal from them. I've grown through them. So, the fact that you get, say, 5 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 decisions wrong is also, therefore, your date with truth, the truth of yourself. It means that you have only reached thus far and you have a long way to go, and the mistakes that you commit are actually the pointers to the weak spots that you have. And if you're a wise person, if we are wise people, we will address those weak spots, and that is where thinking comes in. See, thinking is not once and for all. This is another mistake. Many people think, yes, I have taken my decision after a lot of thinking, and now I will not think. No. You do a lot of thinking, fine, before taking the decisions. You, for God's sake, think and continue to think when you implement your decisions. And even more, continue to think when the consequences begin to unfold, so that your mistakes become your empowering experiences. All these things, your mistakes as well as your victories, your success as well as your loss, your profit and loss, all these things together add to the repertoire of your personal experience. Okay? So don't worry about how many you get wrong, only mind how many of them have become your gurus, your teachers. All right? Yes.
Sir, my question is, sir, when...
Speak into the mic. Hey, it's fine. Nothing wrong with the mic. You hold it closer to yourself. It's not a very sensitive microphone. Huh?
Sir, so when we are doing our daily activities, suppose we are focusing on one particular activity, there are a lot of thoughts haunting our mind. Some innumerable thoughts. So innumerable thoughts sometimes come into our mind when we are studying also. So we cannot focus on one particular thing only. So how can we focus on one particular thing and do our that activity?
Okay. Now you're actually introducing a very different issue, but I'll respond to it. This does not belong to the dynamics of thinking. This belongs to the question of concentration. I know it's a real issue faced by students, young people, and particularly in our youth. We find it difficult to bridle our mind. How do we do this? Now, human mind is one of the most intractable things. It's an untrained horse. Our mind is like an untrained horse. But the good thing is that this horse can be trained. Now, just as training the horse takes a certain procedure and a certain perseverance, you have to persevere with it. For example, I experienced this problem when I was a young man. Even today, to some extent, I do face the problem. Now, the lack of your ability to stay locked in or locked into a particular text, a theme, an issue, a concept, could be because of various factors. One, you are not sufficiently appreciative of it. You see, there is now, in the learning process, what happens is, in the early stages, between you and the concept, there is a huge distance. Distance is a medium of strain. You understand? Now, for example, it is easy for you to reach out to Rohit, sitting where you are. But if you have to go and touch somebody here, sitting there, you have to strain yourself, right? Distance is, from an intellectual point of view, a medium of strain. So, in the early stages, you're actually struggling with the reality of intellectual distance. And after a while, what happens is the mind gets tired, and you therefore tend to go somewhere else. Whereas, when you reach a level of intellectual intimacy, the distance is very narrow, therefore you stay focused. This is one thing. The second thing is that you have actually allowed your mind to be invaded and colonized by all kinds of contrary interests. This is where, the world of distractions in which you live has aggravated the burden of young people. Throughout the daytime you expose yourself to all kinds of things. They necessarily tickle you. You find it very enjoyable. And so, see, in life everything is comparative. You sit at your desk reading a book, and suddenly some kind of an unconscious comparison takes place. Well, your mind automatically runs there. So, instead of reading your text, you are sitting in the cafe sipping tea. And only after 15 minutes you realize that you are nowhere near the text. Right? Now, what you should do is, and this is what I did when I was of your age. What I did was, whenever I found my mind wandering, I would read a particular paragraph with the intention to write the summary. All right? Then my mind stays focused. Second thing is, I will try and see if there is something in that text which is akin to my experience, which of course is, at your age, could be very rare. But there may be something, for example, a word. A word may speak to you in a special way. That could become some kind of a hook, as it were. But nothing is more useful and helpful in controlling the mind than writing. And reading is what I call reading with an intent. Right? If you're just reading, your mind wanders. Naturally it wanders. But for example, when I read a text, from the point of view of writing something. So I'm writing something, and I'm reading a book which has something to do with it. My intention, my concentration is intense. There's no way my mind will wander. So that's what I'm saying. It's a question of intimacy, right? And this way you can overcome over a period of time, and it's extremely good that you have become aware of it. Being aware of the problem is half the solution. But you try and do this. Try and hold your mind to account by accepting for yourself the intention to write the summary of what you read. Initially you would think that this is slow going because writing takes time, because nowadays people are very impatient. You want to read like 100 meters dash, Usain Bolt in reading. That doesn't help. All intellectual growth takes a lot of patience, a lot of time. Skills cannot be short-circuited. You have to labor and you have to have patience. Right? It will happen.
To how much extent meditation is helpful in it?
You see, meditation in the religious sense of the term may help in getting greater control over your mental activities. I mean, I do not discount that possibility. But in the intellectual academic context, you have to additionally build this into it. The intent, yeah. Any other question? Yes.
No offense to any religion, but all religious scriptures teach us to seek the truth. They concentrate on spirituality.
Yeah.
But when we look at religions, we find more rituals. Where do we lose the connect?
Good. Fine. Well, the answer is actually already present in a silent fashion in your own question, because your question is structured on a contrast between religion and scripture. You said all religious scriptures urge us to seek the truth. 100% right. It's also factually true that all religions are overridden by rituals. True. It actually means that between the religious scripture and religious practices which are laden with rituals, there is a contradiction. And the question, of course, is how did this contradiction come about? It came about because of the dominance of the priestly class, because in order to secure their control over the community of faith, the priestly class uses certain tricks. And one of the very common tricks in all religions is rituals, over which they exercise complete hegemony. Only the priest or the pandit can conduct these rituals. What additional qualification does he have? For example, only men can be priests, right? Women cannot be priests. Why? Give me one reason for it. It is hegemony of a gender-based biased kind. Within that, what kind of a man are you? If you actually look at these people, they are the least developed specimens of humanity. And they arrogate to themselves the right to preside over your destiny. And we are foolish enough, tame enough, to accept their dictates without questioning. Only we are to blame for it, not they. Sufficient awareness must spread among people or members of all religious communities that this tyranny of mediocrity, this dishonest, exploitative, ungodly domination or tyranny of mediocrity must be questioned. Right? So, once this happens, now rituals, I'm glad you raised this issue, rituals actually are some kind of anesthetics, in the sense that they keep us at a level below that of consciousness. Who thinks even marginally through an experience of a ritual? A ritual is repeated endlessly, right? It's like the rotation of a wheel. It's like a rotation. It is mechanical. As a matter of fact, rituals do contain some seeds of thought. But neither the man presides over it, man underlined, nor the men and women watching it, or not watching it, but just, I notice that very often people do not even take cognizance of the ritual in progress. But they are very insistent that the ritual must be done. Okay? Now, neither the man doing it, nor the people who are lapping it up, ever ask the question, what is the meaning of this? For example, take the ritual called Havan. There's some fantastic meanings in it. Who in the world is aware of this? Who is bothered? Or for that matter, it is considered auspicious to break a coconut. Now, what does it mean? Oh, surely there is a meaning. But the gentleman who very gladly, gleefully breaks the coconut, knows nothing about it. So all these rituals and practices may contain some seeds of thought, but the seeds of thought are rejected, the meaning is renounced, the mechanism is retained. And this is why these things have become devoid of any nourishment for life.
I would like to share a very nice incident. I went to Bangla Sahib Gurdwara 2 years back, and one of the priests there was telling a story, and he said it so nicely. He says most of the people say that in 48 hours we do a Khand Path. And that's a ritual, you know, whatever we ask from God has to be fulfilled within a specified period. But he said the Guru Granth Sahib has been given by the, gurus so that you imbibe it in life. It's given to you to imbibe it in your life, and you give it to the Guru that I read it 4 times, I read it 5 times, or within a year I did this. I was really impressed by, we never even look at the thing, ritualistically we are doing something without realizing that it is for imbibing in life, not giving it to the God as an offering.
Yes.
That's an offering to us.
Yes, that's right. While religious scriptures urge us to seek, as you say, rituals discourage us from seeking. And this is a contradictions embedded in the religious sector, and the sooner we realize it, the better. Okay. Next, yes. Who will answer, take up all questions.
So is it, the destiny, is it worth talking about when we consider the act of thinking? Destiny.
Yeah. Now, of course, you see, these are very expansive oceanic concepts. Destiny. Destiny, let's say, is a sum total of all that we do and all that we do not do. That's how our life is made, our destiny is made. And therefore, in a very real sense, our destiny is the product of our lifelong thinking. Because as I said, no decision making is possible without thinking. Even to decide not to think, you have to think. Right? So it's really not possible to not think. So one may choose to live an unthinking life, like animals. But even in that process, some embryonic thinking does take place, but it may be purely negative. It doesn't contribute anything to his own or her own richness of life or sanity of life. Now, the difference between fate and destiny. Now, I'm so sorry about this. Now, fate is somehow autonomous from the individual. It is fixed. Destiny is made by the individual. There is a saying that life is God's gift to us. What we do with our life is our gift to God. Okay? Now, what we do with our life must involve at all stages responsible thinking. The other alternative is to drift through life. As I said in my lecture, sleepwalk through life. That's possible. But then you're actually not an active player, the subject of your destiny. You become actually the object of your destiny. Subject is the active agent. Object is the point at which consequences fall. Okay? So you lose control over yourself. And this is how people embrace that very unfortunate state called victimhood. People who do not exercise the faculties they have to think and to decide wisely, they immediately embrace their self-image as victims. They say, oh, life has given us a raw deal. Oh, I'm always ill-treated. Oh, I have no opportunities. But the first thing they say is, I have no abilities. Even before you have given an effort, or made an effort, or given a try to anything at all, you come to the foregone conclusion that you're good for nothing. And that's a victimhood. That's the language of victimhood. You understand? So, these possibilities do exist. The very purpose of our coming together like this is to escape from that trap and to assume a dynamic responsibility for our long-term well-being, which is possible. Which is possible. If we don't do this, if we don't become sufficiently aware of these things, we'll end up as fools of time and end the evening of our life, spend the evening of our life in utter frustration, remorse and guilt. And that is real hell on earth. If there is a hell on earth, it is this. The kind of self-denigrating remorse to which we have condemned ourselves, consigned ourselves. All hells are self-created. There is no hell created by God. That's not God's expertise, it's our expertise. All right? Yeah. Any other?
So we have been discussing about thinking. Now let us assume that we are in a situation where we have to take some decisions and they are time bound. And we think harder, we think deeper. And we reach a point where we say that I can no more think. How do we describe that situation and come out of it?
No, you're actually thinking of fatigue. You're referring to what is called mental fatigue, right? Now, first of all, you may have to question the assumption that this decision has to be taken within this time frame. It may not be true at all. May be true, need not be true. Okay? Very often, many of our perceptions could be wrong in this respect. Now, sometimes, you need not necessarily take the decision within 5 hours. You may take 5 days over it. Heavens are not going to fall. Do not take a decision without some degree of responsible thinking. That, I think, is the bottom line. Do not let external compulsions and pressures to rush into something over which you really have no clarity of thought. That's the bottom line, right? Now, the fact that you feel that during this particular supposedly granted time, which I have already questioned, your mind is packing, your thinking process is shutting down. It is not because life has exhausted possibilities. It is that you have suddenly struck the dead wall, what's called the cul-de-sac, the dead end. But that's a subjective thing actually. If you were to sleep over it, if you were to spend a little time, do not be rushed. There's no need for it. Spend a little time over it and take your decision when it is ripe and ready. And sometimes it does happen that the sense of hurry that you experienced was spurious, and therefore it turned out to be wise that you did not rush into that decision. And many, many situations look completely different in retrospect. Right now you have a certain idea about the situation. You say, well, within the situation I have to take this decision by tomorrow. Now, that is your perception of the situation right now. But 10 years or 20 years later, when you looked at the situation, you felt, well, that was not the case at all. So many of these things are actually illusory. But there may be situations where immediate decision has to be taken. For example, your house is on fire. You can't say, well, I'll decide day after tomorrow. You have to take a decision then and there. But one thing is sure, and that's my personal testimony. Life is such, the justice of life is such, that we will be given either the spontaneous wisdom to handle an immediate crisis or the long-term wisdom to handle situations that are not really an emergent crisis. All right? That's the justice of life. Very often we have anxieties to the contrary because we have not experienced it. When I look back on my life, I tell you this is the case, that life was always fair and kind. I did not have the eyes to see it. Many of the situations which I thought were completely urgent, if I did not do it then and there, heavens will fall. It was not true. Nothing would have happened. Okay? And if you are getting mentally fatigued, immediately stop. There's no harm at all. You're not doing anybody any disservice, much less yourself. Take your time and take decisions in the freshness of mind, clarity. Right? Yes. Next.
evening, sir. Sir, in your inaugural lecture, you said it is better to produce an idea than knowledge. So in the same context, if you take knowledge to be information serving to the market prices in different forms. So in the same context, if I may ask, does knowledge curb free thinking? Does knowledge curb free thinking? And if it does, how does it? Thank you, sir.
Well, yes. Every human faculty, every resource has two contrary possibilities. Much in life is like a double-edged sword. This is why developing discernment is important. Knowledge is power, potential power, powerful in itself. So obviously it is greatly beneficial to use. But what kind of knowledge? Second, knowledge to what end? You don't separate the knowledge you possess from the goal you pursue, the intention that you harbor. Now the same knowledge can be used to hurt somebody or to comfort someone, to guide someone or to mislead someone. Law, for example, or rules and regulations. As an administrator, I can tell you, I can use rules and regulations either to help people or to stop them, to hurt them. So the intent is extremely important in decision making, right? I'm glad you asked this question. So we must have knowledge, there's no question. Ignorance doesn't help. But we must temper knowledge with the goodness of our being. A good human being, being a good human being is also an important condition for thinking right. Right? So that is the balance that needs to be maintained. Mere knowledge will not suffice because life is much, much more than quantitative information or knowledge. This is where wisdom comes, the distinction between wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom always takes the long-term perspective, within which intentions are important. Knowledge can be used spontaneously and even unthinkingly, but wisdom is always the product of thinking long-term in this kind of holistic framework that I talked about. Okay? Any other?
Good evening, sir. You spoke something about pain and painkillers. It's a very troublesome topic, I think. And no, not, yes, I do have a chemist shop. I mean, I do dispensing. Pain is something
I did not know that you dispensed medicine. I didn't want to hurt you. But anyway, come.
No, I don't think it is anything to hurt me. I mean, it's regular business with anyone and everyone goes through a pain and suffers, no, I think there's nobody who's not suffering. So what I want to ask you is that, do you mean to say that we should evade painkillers? I mean, a human being can evade painkillers, go through a pain and relieve himself. You get relief if you don't.
Yes.
So do you mean we should evade painkillers?
Yes. Good. That's a very important question. Actually, my wife is an anesthetist. She is sitting here. Pain management is her specialization, not mine. But as someone who has thought about these things, I have a few comments to offer. Now, it has been established through empirical research that a person's attitude to pain, experience of pain, the way a person relates to pain, is a very important pointer to the kind of human being he is. You would have noticed that some people just, collapse or lose their composure at the slightest experience of pain. For example, I have seen people crying at the sight of needle, injection needle. I mean, it's a very small thing, but some people get so jittery, right? Now, some people can take an injection without any problem, right? Now, therefore, this is called the threshold of pain. That is the degree, the extent of pain that you can actually put up with. Now, what has happened is, culturally speaking, the modern culture works on the dogmatic assumption that pain is evil. Modern medicine has, this is what doctors say, 3 major achievements or breakthroughs. One is the avoidance of pain. Second is the prevention of disability. Third is the postponement of death. Almost all important medical breakthroughs belong to these categories. It's been established that 1/3 of the medicines consumed in developed societies belong to the category analgesics, painkillers. Which indicates the dominance of the motive to either control pain or to avoid pain. Now, there was a time when pain-free delivery was the norm. The woman in labor can be subjected to an anesthetic process, by which she becomes completely insensitive to the pain that actually does exist. You can't avoid pain. You can only prevent pain from reaching your brain. Pain is there. You choose to experience it or not to experience it. But I tell you, I'm not a woman who has delivered, but I have imaginatively gone through these things. The experience of a woman who delivers her baby in pain is very different from the motherhood of a woman who has a painless delivery. Second, there was a time when I couldn't spend a single day without popping a painkiller into my mouth. I lived on painkillers, all kinds of painkillers, brufen, indomethacin, so on and so forth. That was my daily sustenance. Then I realized that my very body was undergoing change. It was doing a serious harm to me. I decided to renounce painkillers. Now for years, I have managed without painkillers. All painkillers certainly have the side effects of affecting your kidneys. The degree of harm may vary, but they do have very serious side effects. But at any rate, I feel that my sensibilities deepened, my self-confidence increased, and the process of self-attrition I used to feel decreased when I gave up on painkillers. So yes, these are shortcuts. For the time being, your common sense, such as it is, makes you think that if you have pain, get rid of it, pop a pill, and you're all right, you go on. But in the long run, that's extremely foolish. We underestimate the capacity, the enormous and mysterious capacity of the human body to cope with a lot of things. And it's better that we cope with these things rather than resort to the resources of technology and believe that what the technology offers is a lot superior to what the body offers. The body is wiser than technology. Anyone else? Well, I think we'll bring it to a close. Now, I would rather have a small audience in which every person asks a question than a large audience in which no one asks or one or two only ask. So I think it's a very good experience, and I must thank you for participating in today's session. I have hugely enjoyed being with you, and each time I miss your session, I must tell you it's a wrench, and there's no exaggeration. I tell you the truth. It's a wrench for me to be away, and I thank you that we can continue our journey together, and I look forward to resuming the same subject next week, 4 o'clock. So till then, take care. Oh, yes. Let's discuss that. Now, she feels quite rightly too that now that winter is round the corner, 4 o'clock is a bit too late, and that's true especially for people who come from a distance. I have no problem in beginning at 3 o'clock. Would you like the time to be advanced? 3? So next week it is 3 o'clock. Please inform everyone of the change in time. I'll also try and send an email to all concerned. and reach out to our friends who are resorting to the cleverer option of staying at home and perhaps looking it up on the net. Right? Perhaps tactically it's not a wise thing that I have done, that these things are posted every day. Fine. No, it's available on my Facebook page. I always provide the link to these lectures from the Network 18 site. I take the link and put it on my Facebook. You can access it. They've changed the page, I know that. From there also you can get, okay? It's certainly available on my Facebook page, okay? It's and all of your members, at least a majority of your members, so you can easily get it. It's not an issue, okay? All right, so that's the end of the day, day's work.